We're back with the Screen Team. We're doing our second half hour of the full hour show, and we're being joined by our good friend Kyle. Kyle, man, it's good to hear from you again, and we're doing another one of those sports documentary things, man. I know you love them. I love them too, man, doing these ESPN 30 for 30 documentaries, and we've got three more to do this evening. The first one we're going to be doing is the 85 Bears. Now, were you even born in 1985, man?
Negatory. 2 years later.
But, I mean, this is one of the greatest football teams of all time, and they do a documentary of it. What were your initial thoughts when you saw it?
Well, I didn't want to actually see it just because the 85 Bears have been talked about ad nauseum. It's almost like you've heard everything about the football team, the unique personalities, the Super Bowl shuffle, the defense and Ditka and all that. Yeah, you've heard it over and over and over. But being a glutton for football, I gave it a shot. I was very, very, very impressed. Came out very happy that I actually took time to watch it.
It was an interesting documentary. One, it was narrated by Vince Vaughn, who's a lifelong Chicagoan, and he's a Bears fan too. So that was kind of cool to see Vince Vaughn doing the narration for it. And one thing I found was interesting was the divide between the two coaches, Ditka and
Buddy Ryan.
Buddy Ryan, yeah.
Yeah. Well, those two guys were notorious alpha male type A personalities. Of course, Ditka's was legendary. And not as many people may know about Buddy Ryan. He later would become a head coach for the Philadelphia Eagles and take a lot of that bravado with him. But he was the defensive coordinator and felt that he had as much to do with the success of the football team deservedly as Mike Ditka did, especially because of what that 85 Bears team is known for. They butted heads a lot.
What I thought was interesting was Buddy Ryan. I mean, great defensive mind, genius if you want to call it that, but he was also kind of a jerk. But his players would do anything for him. They loved him. I mean, not liked him. They loved him.
Yeah, that kind of loyalty is hard to come by in today's sports landscape. When you have basically what they call a ride or die coach that you would do literally anything for. You just don't see that every day because guys, hop around teams and coaches are interchangeable. Very few. I mean, maybe Bill Belichick, you could say that with the Patriots, but Buddy Ryan, you would almost go to the grave for. And you saw it with the type of players he had, the Mike Singletaries, the Dan Hamptons, the Steve McMichaels on that defense, Richard Dent, and of course the Fridge. Those are some bad men, and they play for a rough coach. And even if he was a little bit of a jerk, it was worth it. And also, it bleeds down to the day in the NFL with his two sons coaching. Rob Ryan is the defensive coordinator of the Ravens, and, of course, Rex Ryan, the former coach of the Jets, now with the Buffalo Bills. And that attitude kind of radiated to them as well.
Now, you talk about bad boys, and probably the baddest boy of them all was Jim McMahon. What are your thoughts on him?
Jim McMahon, boy, I'm going to tell you that if there was one quarterback who did not care what came out of his mouth, it was definitely Jim McMahon. Not the most skilled or talented quarterback on the planet, but he got the job done, tough as nails. He was the epitome of Chicago as a personality. He was tough as nails, blue collar, which is funny considering that he played his college football at BYU, a Mormon college. A guy like that, you couldn't paint him playing at a Mormon school whatsoever, and then jump to play for the rough and tumble Chicago Bears. But it worked, and he was the physical embodiment of that city's personality and that football team. Like it wouldn't make sense, but you have to watch the documentary, even if you weren't born around that time, like myself. It at least gives you the sense that you could have understood how that team was, how they operated during that time, just on a smaller scale. Now, for those who actually lived it, you'd have a better understanding, and you really did this.
At the close to the end of the documentary, they focus on Jim McMahon and his health, and they kind of get into the whole concussion stuff, and I thought that was kind of interesting. And they kind of showed how Jim is, I don't want to say winning the battle, but he's sustaining a healthy life for his his golden years ahead of him. I just thought that was kind of interesting how they showed how he's surviving with that.
Well, the way he played, it amazed me that he still lasted into the 90s. I believe his career ended in about 93 or 94. And he was able to last that long as a backup in the league, despite taking all those hits, because concussions weren't documented on the level then as they are now. So who knows how many that he actually wound up with at the end of his career. And the fact that he's still a well-functioning member of society playing his style of football is a miracle a day. And I was very shocked and actually very happy to see that he was able to function, unlike a lot of other players who's had to retire short because of concussion syndrome or guys who just couldn't play anymore. So it's an honest miracle, and I was very happy that he's still living well with us. The part that got me the most, I don't know about you, kind of choked up a bit, was Mike Singletary, his interactions with Buddy Ryan, who's still living with us, but he's very frail and he's very sick, and you don't see all that bravado and machismo that he exuded in his youth as a coach. You don't see it now, and it's a little hard. It's heartbreaking, even if you're not a Bears fan. That tore me a little bit of, tore some tears out of my eyes, man. It was tough.
So let me ask you: the '85 Bears are considered one of the greatest football teams of all time. I think they lost one or two games that season. How come they weren't a dynasty? How come this was only a one and done deal with them?
I think a lot of those guys were at the prime of their career right there. They were at the apex. Some of those guys, they just weren't the same anymore. Like Walter Payton had maybe about 2 years left in him. Because he was not the same. He was an older back. A lot of those guys were older players. They came together at the right time, the right defensive scheme, the 46 defense, which was used for a lot of years by other dominant defensive squads like the Eagles of the early 2000s. They just came along at the right time with the perfect coaching, who exuded the right demeanor. Sometimes football, as you know, or just in sports, it's a perfect storm. Like you look at the 99 Rams, that was a perfect storm. The 85 Bears, to me, were a perfect storm of defensive football that just could not be stopped. And a lot of those guys, either they were getting older, some retired, some left to go get bigger money elsewhere, and the team just, started to die down a little bit. But that was a once-in-a-lifetime defense and a once-in-a-lifetime group of personalities that you may not never see again.
So do you have to be a fan of the Bears to like this documentary?
Absolutely not. Originally, I would have said yes, and I didn't want to watch it once again just because, if you heard one story about them, you heard them all. But because the 30 for 30 series has done such an outstanding job of pulling fresh elements from stories that you've already heard, a million times, I sat down and watched it, and not at all. Ironically, a friend of mine who works for the DAR in Poplar, Bluff, who is a huge Bears fan, poor guy, he told me, he said, you have to watch this. And I said, okay, I gave it a shot. And then I texted him and said, I'm mad at you. You made me cry. It's an outstanding documentary. You don't have to be a Bears fan. Heck, I think even a Packers fan would break down for this one.
Very good. It's called The 85 Bears. It's a ESPN 30 for 30 documentary, and it's streaming right now on Netflix. Coming up after the break, we're going to review The Bad Boys. It's next on KWOC.